A warm welcome from my side for our today's discussion about international collaboration. Gerret, you're working on this field. How do you feel about collaboration, international collaboration on additive?
I think international collaboration is a very important topic, and in additive manufacturing especially we have the case that the whole industry is from the beginning, or was from the beginning, really international. And we see that in our community in Aachen, that we are not restricted to German companies. We are really open. We have Asian companies in our community as well as American companies, and that makes the collaboration more fruitful.
In Yian, Singapore, famous, well known for creating innovation-friendly environment. What is your view?
If we look at additive manufacturing, I could give you an example, right? So about 4 years ago, we embarked on an additive manufacturing roadmap for the marine and offshore industry. And we selected that because it's an important economic sector to us in Singapore. But we also realized that if you look worldwide, there wasn't really anybody who was taking that space seriously when it came to additive manufacturing. So all the focus on aerospace, automotive, medtech, and we felt, okay, but this space is important to us, so if nobody else is working on it, let's try and build out that space more for additive. So we brought in the local shipyard, so Sembcorp Marine. We brought in classification societies, so DNV from Europe was brought in to support from an inspection standpoint, because they will be the ones to help the companies figure out whether the additive manufactured part is good enough, how it compares with conventional, and can it actually be installed on a vessel or in an oil rig, for instance. Of course, the shipyard is there as a manufacturer. We brought in a local service bureau called 3D Metal Forge, and them together with the yard then who engage engine companies, equipment companies in marine and so on to gain access to the spare parts manufacturing. So you have Asian companies based in Singapore working with a European technology and certification providers. They developed that certification pathway, they brought out the parts, they qualify to show that it can work. And then using that same network, because you're working with global companies, you bring it to another hub in Houston. Right? So by nature, it should be international right from the beginning, from the design. But if you think of it in such terms, then everybody in this picture, all the key partners can see that, hey, I can see the upside for me.
It's such a, as you said, a fantastic example of collaboration and this scaling. I think the challenge that I'm seeing from the World Economic Forum's perspective is that it's still a rare example. And so I think it's a hurdle and a hump we need to get over. If we're really going to see the full benefit of additive, we need to be sharing these success stories. You know, as you know, and you said, bringing it from the port in Singapore to Houston and really building this out and letting other people see the advantages.
Thanks, Yian. And I only can emphasize what you have said. It's really at the end of the day about the openness, the willingness to collaborate. And in the last 1.5 years, I mean, maybe Yian also, you COVID is there. How would you describe the impacts on the collaboration on an international level with regard to additive?
The biggest impact that I've seen is awareness. I mean, you saw additive manufacturers stepping up in the early days of the pandemic to try to fill either gaps in traditional supply chains or to support healthcare systems. But I think in many ways that put a renewed attention onto the sector from traditional manufacturers and potential end users of saying, wow, it seems like there's been some progress here in this space where I wasn't really sure if I should get involved. And now I think I need to be looking and really trying to understand how I could implement additive into my own supply chains.
One of the big challenges in additive, whether it's for medical or for marine or aerospace, for instance, is that when you first start designing the part, you don't really know how long it's going to take before it gets approved and qualified for use. You don't know how much it's going to cost, and to get to that stage and bring it to the market. And then for a company, therefore, this translates to very high financial risk. But if from the beginning you had the certification and qualification support, you design around that, you build it out, and you have a high degree of confidence that say it will take X amount of time and Y cost to get this design to market, you have a lot more control over the risk, and the company can make an informed decision from the beginning. Is this worth going for? Because otherwise it's very difficult. The risk is just not quantifiable. Yeah. So I think that is a lesson that we learned under pressure that we need to replicate in more and more cases, right?
That's a perfect example of what really can be done when the whole ecosystem collaborates. And even, when additive manufacturers want to help out in that situation, but they don't have connections maybe to sterilized packaging suppliers. How do you build that whole ecosystem together? So again, I think it's a fantastic example of what can be done when we do collaborate and how we connect those two questions.
I agree. I mean, that's a perfect example. What are your experiences in the cluster?
Especially in the first 2 months, let's say last year, March, April, there were really a lot of initiatives coming up every week, and they were all connected. And 2-3 weeks moving into the year, more and more time, they managed to get all those initiatives together, like different mask production technologies, the nozzle swabs as well. So there were many things that came up within a short period of time. However, what I've experienced is that still there was like those small islands, and there was nobody really putting that together. But at the end, let's say last summer, you had a couple of players who were really good. They had a network of someone who's confident in medical products. For example, for masks, they were confident in fabrics and textile technology. And then you had someone who's able to do the forms and tools, and you had the whole value chain properly set up. And that was really cool to see that how fast that went.
What role do governments play in accelerating the industrialization of this fascinating technology?
The example Yian gave earlier in sort of the certifications, accreditations, I think that proved that when there is sort of the right amount of support and a well-designed system, and the example you gave was one out of need and necessity, but that we can actually drive something very quickly. And there can be a huge impact in a short period of time. And I think that also speaks to what we see as probably one of the biggest areas where governments can play a role is around standards. The sectors and standards and certifications, I think, we have certifying organizations. I think you mentioned TÜV earlier, and they're incredibly important. But when governments start getting involved, you start to see these transitions and shifts where then the market knows, like, okay, this is the box I have to fit. I think that's also, from a government perspective, the power that they can play in helping to align and set standards of how these systems are going to work, from IP, from digital trade. I mean, that's another huge place where we look at what's the future, an interesting trend that I think is still on the horizon. If you're just sending data files, how do we calculate value add from a content? And I think these are really interesting places that government must play a role, but they have to do it in collaboration with the industry. Because if either of these sort of conversations happen in a silo, we're going to sub-optimize what we all hope to happen. And it could mean that the industry itself doesn't move as quickly as we need it to.
When we talk about local governments, they are really supportive and they're more flexible than probably state governments or the federal government in Germany. However, especially in the COVID times, frugality and really pushing of individual organizations has been the key to innovation and to success, because that's kind of the way how it is. Public funding takes a long time.
And if you look at where we place the money, so that largely went to 3 areas. The first was talent training, so at multiple levels. So talk about training people at the PhD, also the level, so funding their thesis projects, so you come up with top researchers. You talk about bringing in the top academics from around the world, okay, to work on research in Singapore. You also look slightly lower at maybe at the master's level, and we also looked at, okay, but it's not just about students. There are also workers and employees in the traditional industries today who need to be retrained. So we set up training centers for them as well. So we put hundreds of people through all these programs. The second they went into was more on the research side. So we set up, we make sure we have the world-class labs in Singapore We make sure that we look at all the range of additive manufacturing technologies, and we all know there are so many. We set up 7 R&D centers all across the island, okay, to do this. Each focus on different types of technologies, different application areas, and was that we also funded. And it's a bit of a cross between, it's a bit like an industry association and a technology transfer office at the same time. It's called the National Additive Manufacturing Innovation Cluster in Singapore, or NAMIC for short, the abbreviation. Yeah. So these are guys who kind of beat the ground, meet everybody in the additive manufacturing landscape and ecosystem, not just in Singapore, but eventually they expanded regionally in Asia as well. And the idea was for them to create a community, know everyone, know what everyone is doing, and where relevant, they can make the direct one-to-one connections so that cooperation can proceed. And also, very critically, very vitally, they are also the people who welcome new additions, new entrants into the ecosystem, into the community. And if you are a new, if you're a German company, you come out with you have a brilliant idea on additive manufacturing. You come out with a machine, and you want to bring it to Asia to find a market there. How do you do that? You don't know anybody, right? So you come in, you meet with NAMIC, and they say, hey, you know what? We've been speaking with company X and Y, and we think they might be interested in what you're doing, right? Maybe let's see if we could set something up. Or if that's not appropriate, they have buy at every 6 months, and it's a conference in Singapore. It's basically an excuse for everybody to come together, and then interactions can happen, engagements can happen, and bring it forward from there. And it's a very welcoming way to integrate new entrants, get them embedded quickly in the community, for them to understand, okay, this is how the ecosystem works, this is who I can work with, this is what my potential partners and customers expect from me. Because if I want to grow in the region, I have to invest in the region, and I have to think about what do I invest in. All that happened because when the opportunity arose, we knew exactly who to call, we knew exactly what to say to each person, we knew how their interests could be aligned. And we knew this because we knew them well. We've spoken many times, and discussed many times before. So when we brought people together in the same room, the collaboration will kick off very easily and very smoothly as a result. So there's a lot of value in that. And if you think about it, that's not really quantifiable. That has nothing to do with how much money has been invested. So it's not about how much financial resource you put in, but how have you designed your mechanisms. As a government, you have the ability. If you have the ability to do that, then how are you designing the mechanisms? Are you setting up the right institutions and the right environment for collaboration, for innovation to take place, for companies to feel welcome, and then they can operate?
It's a really smart solution that shows commitment and it shows focus. And this is what sometimes in Europe is not easily found in the communities. So when I look at Aachen with the ACAM, we try the same thing. We try the same thing on a more broader level on the TH campus, and a more focused level on additive manufacturing with the ACAM. However, it's not like we have those strong commitments from the government. It's really like bits and pieces from the states, somewhere a community here, somewhere here, and you always struggle for a solid funding. And from your points, I would say that in Singapore there's more a focus, more strict way to push one thing and move it. What
are the key drivers for these success?
I think it's when we take this ecosystem approach, is that when there's been the most success, it's when, and not to sort of kill the idea of collaboration here by mentioning it too much, but you do have to have all of these pieces working in tandem. Additive manufacturing is an amazing technology. It is an amazing process by which we can do a lot, but it can't solve all of the issues for manufacturers on its own. And so it's by having those conversations. I mean, you even mentioned, by the time you look to support a manufacturer in what they're trying to do in Singapore, you'd had so many conversations, you really understood what was going on. And it takes that type of dedication, I think, across the entire ecosystem.
I think that's a good point, because it comes always down to trust. Trusting somebody with your task, with your ideas, but also accepting that maybe somebody in the industry can do certain things better And together you provide a better solution, a better success story. And from our experience in Aachen, that works really well with small companies that are really having an idea and coming with a certain problem, but they don't have the depth in the organization to cover all the problems. And then they come to a community and say, who do you have in your community who can help me? And then you say, you can go to this organization for your design. You can go to this organization to print a part. And so you bring people together, but that needs trust in the abilities of others and the willingness to probably share success as well.
Thanks to all of you.